Senator Birdwell, we've talked a little bit today about, and I know with you and I both serving in committee, you did such a fine job in laying out this bill and hearing the testimony in committee and concerns to follow up with Senator Ellis's concerns on implementation and cost. I just wanted to make sure with a few of the members in private conversation earlier about details of the bill that we would readdress or repeat for them some answers related to the cost of implementations and the burdens related there for our universities that were expressed in committee, especially with relation to the high-tech safes that were brought up that may be needed, and just the overall cost in general. So could you repeat some of those answers again for clarity?
Well, the one answer that I remember most compellingly was the cost of not implementing. Not implementing meaning the cost in lives you will potentially lose because we failed to protect this right. That was the one that was most compelling. There are a number of options out there for storage of weapons. I mean, I have one in my desks in various places at the house and the like, that clearly safe, clearly inexpensive, responsible adult and the like. But I return back to the element of what's the cost, whether it was at Virginia Tech or other things that have happened on campus, to the cost in lives or maiming and injury, because we have created a circumstance in our public universities where they are known to not be able to defend themselves. And that's what this bill is really trying to address.
Well, I appreciate your clarification on that and repeating those great answers from earlier for the membership, just so that they could hear it again, and for the members that weren't in committee when the bill was laid out, because we hear a lot of the concerns about the burden of implementation and costs associated with that. But you and I both know from that committee testimony that the only cost that was being discussed when the coward that entered the classroom on the campus of the Virginia Tech campus that day, when before law enforcement could arrive in that classroom, 30 students were deceased, including the shooter who had taken his own life. And the costs that were discussed following that by the community, by law enforcement, by campus officials, by their legislature, were all associated with the lives that were lost, because at the end of the day, someone's Second Amendment right was denied, and they were not in turn able to defend themselves in that classroom. And wouldn't you agree that that's the cost that we should be talking about today when we're talking about burden versus benefit?
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah,
so,
I couldn't agree more. There's no response I can give that'll be better than your question.
So and I think we all agree, the members on this floor, that we should all be allowed to protect ourselves with our Second Amendment right in our own homes. But when our kids go to these campuses, and that is their campus home, yet they're denied the right to protect themselves. And you and I both heard from the president of the Sheriff's Association, who was very articulate in committee in saying, remind me again what he said about gun-free zones.
Yeah, they're not really gun-free. They're a gun-free zone. Well, they're designated a gun-free zone to the law-abiding, but they're not gun-free to the criminal.
Correct, Senator Birdwell. The president of the Sheriff's Association, in saying he didn't believe there was any such thing as a gun-free zone for those very reasons. So when these kids and these students go to their new campus home, this bill will allow themselves to protect themselves in their new campus home, just as they could.
Correct.
And we all should be allowed to protect ourselves in our own homes.
Yeah, absolutely. I would simply make one addition to what you've said, Senator Creighton, that CHL holders are 21 or older based upon our current CHL law. And I know what you mean when you say kids. My son's 26, so I still look at him as a kid, but he's an adult. I want to make sure that we're trusting our law-abiding adults to be adults. And one of the things I learned as a officer in the United States Army is when you expect high standards, you'll get them. If you expect low standards, you'll get those too. And I think it's time we start treating our adult CHL holders as the adults they are.
And under concealed carry, there's not going to be, by those that have bad intentions, there's really not going to be knowledge of how old that student is or if that student is carrying or not, because it's concealed, correct?
That's correct. That's correct.
And so that student will have legal means through concealed carry licensure requirements to have a firearm to protect themselves. And the bad actors that never respect any of those provisions or what we put in place as a legislature to follow the law and do the right thing, they're not going to know who,
and they're already there,
out of any of those students is able to protect themselves and isn't.
That's correct.
And at the end of the day, that should trump the burdens of implementation.
Yeah.
And of course, we always have to be aware of costs. But I think you have a great bill, and I appreciate how thoughtful and deliberate you've been in working on crafting a good bill like this.
Thank you, Senator Creighton. I
I
appreciate it,
commend
sir.
you for your effort.
And let me thank you for your support of the bill. Thank you, sir.